We are live.
Okay, welcome everybody to the November 18th Finance Committee for the Council Rock School Board of Directors. I want to first go around the room and have introductions starting to my left.
Mary Ann McKee, School Board.
Ed Tate, School Board. Doug Taylor, Director of Operations. Mike Thorwood, School Board. Matt Federickson, IT Director.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Robert Frazier, Superintendent.
Robert Bruchak, Interim Business Manager.
Jason Harris, Director of Business Administration.
Matt Adams, Transportation Manager.
And I'm Mark Violick, School Board member for a little while longer. Jason, I think this is your first meeting, right?
It is.
I want to welcome you to your first meeting and welcome to Council Rock. I appreciate your dedication. Thank you. Do we want to? Well, we're going to have Matt talk about transportation first. So Matt, I'm going to let you take it.
Okay.
Matt Adams.
All right, you should be good. You can do this. All right, so just talk a little bit about the transportation challenges that we're facing this year. Kind of pushing through the agenda slides a little bit. But, essentially what we're facing is a driver shortage that has been years in the making, and it's not unique to our area. So, I have up here driver counts for the last few years. You can see they've been kind of declining little by little. Typical off-season, we'll see turnover of about 10 drivers, and those can be backfilled for the most part. And that leaves us with, a number of spares going into each day. We can cover call-outs, things like that. But then going from pre-COVID year to, post-COVID year here, we saw massive turnover. We dropped from 131 drivers down to 117 in one off season, and you can't hire fast enough to replace that. Outside of nationwide hiring issues and labor shortages, there's a shortage of qualified CDL drivers, period, and that's industry-wide. That's tractor trailers, that's FedEx trucks, that's school buses. So we see a shortage of about 11 drivers every day going into it. We can shuffle things around and move, drivers here, drivers there, kind of have drivers cover things, run a little bit late. But, at the end of the day, we're short 10 to 15 drivers on an average day. And it's really a direct effect of COVID. So this year, we're feeling the effects of it. Last year we were very tight on drivers, but this year is really hitting us. It's really come home. We can look at some reasons behind why there's a bus driver shortage right now. It's primarily part-time workers, a lot of retirees in the industry. Many drivers accelerated their plans for retirement. They got out of the industry fearing COVID. They don't want to get sick. They're around kids all the time. There's a large population of people who are more likely to be immunocompromised, and they're just not willing to risk it. And they're like, that's it, I'm out, I'm retired. While schools were shut down, while there's no transportation happening, while they don't have a job essentially, retail's booming. Everybody starts ordering things online. Mid-pandemic, nobody's going to the grocery store. It's all coming to your door. That sucked a lot of drivers who didn't have a job out of the industry. And a lot of that was Class B drivers, which are our school bus drivers. I've seen sign-on bonuses out there from Wakefern, which is ShopRite, of $10,000, and that's just to get Class B drivers in the door. And that's, not, school districts can't compete with that. And along those lines too, it's just general uncertainty. School bus drivers want to be employed, they want to work, but, hey, school's shut down for almost a year, but that's not any kind of certainty. They don't know that they're gonna have a steady income, so they're exiting the industry just because of that. And now, the school bus driver job has changed. It's no longer just, getting in the bus, picking kids up, dropping them off safely. Now they're cleaning out the buses. Now they're, after their run, they're going and sanitizing the seats. It's a lot more that's getting asked of them without much in return. So, those are some primary reasons behind it. What that has caused is missed routes, essentially. Going in every day, short drivers, as there's physically more kids that we need to transport in a specific period of time than we have capacity to move. Year to date, well, as of 11/10, we had missed 730 routes, counting an AM and a PM separately. 86 different buses out of our 110, 111 routes have been affected. It averages out to about 8.5 days without service, and we have an average daily driver call out sitting at 14 right now. It's about a little more than 10% of our fleet. You can see in that breakdown, Mondays and Fridays are particularly problematic. Those are long weekends. Driver wants to have a long weekend. You take a Friday off, you take a Monday off, calling sick. It's just they have PTO, they have time off. They're going to use it. We do track the uncovered routes. We do our best to spread out the impact so it's not the same buses every day. There are some limits to that flexibility. A lot of it has to do with the CBA the drivers have with first student. So, we might have 12, 13 open routes and maybe 2 or 3 drivers who are quote unquote standby. So they're not assigned to a specific route. So those drivers we can move around, but that's the only flexibility we have. We can't just take a driver who bid on Route A and put them on Route B.
Matt, for the public, can you explain what CBA is?
The collective bargaining agreement, so it's the Teamsters agreement that they have with First Student. Early on, we did experiment with telling a driver, like, hey, we know you bid on Route A, that's your route. We're going to have you cover Route B. That usually resulted in the driver calling out at about the start time of Route B in the morning, and the route going uncovered anyway, plus that driver's route. So that has created some missed opportunities from a flexibility standpoint, but there's not a lot of control that we have over that, and it's kind of a sticking point. But typically, that's the breakdown that we're looking at, and that's the flexibility we have or don't have. It's about 14 routes that we need to cover, and 2 or 3 drivers who can be moved around.
So I had a question. So is it the collective bargaining unit is working to contract, or you're not able to double routes because of that? Double back? Because what I'm hearing in other school districts is doubling back and they're not missing any routes. So is this a product of the collective bargaining agreement?
Yeah, so in order to have a driver double back, you have to ask them to double back. And, it kind of has to be planned in advance. Asking them same day can create problems because you ask a driver that's willing to do it, but they're not in the right seniority order. I've heard that you get conflicting information from dispatchers who are also part of the union, that it's some say you can't even ask. Others say that, the driver won't do it, or that, you can't just say to a driver that has a short elementary route, come back and pick up the kids. We've also gone into days where we didn't have everything covered, and we were just going to call out to drivers to have, anyone that's free and willing to come back and keep coming back until all the kids are picked up. And I think we ended up with the last couple of kids being picked up at about 6 p.m. While the dispatchers were still calling out on the radio, like, hey, can somebody please come and help get these kids home? We still have kids at school. Please come back. And no response.
Can I follow up on that, please? So, I know a teacher, principal actually, family member that in Pennsbury, and I asked, are you guys, because I heard from another client of mine who's retired, he's bus driving, that they double back. And that's Wissahickon. So maybe they have their own bus drivers. But basically, when they finish their route, they're calling in saying, where can I go? I'm here. Who needs to be picked up? And they really are doing this on the fly to get the kids going. So that's one thing I've heard. So you can ask all around them, and you probably hear what other school districts are doing. That would be probably a good thing to do. And then from Pennsbury, I just know for sure that her elementary school, they are not canceling one bus route all year. And again, if it ends up being that it's something you have to collectively bargain, and I don't know how we go about doing that, but I think I just got an email from somebody regarding that. But what can we do? Because I think if we're not doing everything we can, I can't imagine if some school districts are not doubling, are not canceling routes, and we are, just like, if you're out, you're out, and unfortunately, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Maybe we.
Well, it's not our agreement, right?
It's not our.
We don't
no,
It's for students.
It's for students,
Of
agreement
course.
with the driver. Yeah, and the doubling back is something that the drivers can just refuse to do it. If they're not assigned to it, they can refuse to do it, and that's what we've seen. We don't have enough drivers that will double back every day to cover the routes, and it becomes completely unpredictable when or if you're a student will be on the bus to come home. So, we could do that, but we would have to be able to communicate to parents, your student doesn't have an assigned driver today, and we're going to call out to get drivers back, but we don't know if we will have a driver that will come back, and if we do, when your student will be home. And I don't know how well tolerated that would be.
Well, and that's the key difference, right? If our drivers, if the drivers of Council Rock school buses were Council Rock school district employees, then we wouldn't be canceling routes either. We'd have double backs and, some late buses and all that sort of thing, but we certainly wouldn't be canceling routes.
Yeah.
And it's important for the community to understand that when you hear about other school districts, it's really just a different dynamic because we have outsourced our transportation operations for a number of years now, and we're at the behest of their agreement and the rules that they work by.
Yeah, and I've heard from like Neshaminy, for example, they'll load kids onto a bus just to get them home and just to get them picked up. I don't know if other school districts are doing this, but I don't want to put 85 kids onto a 77 passenger bus and just to get them home. I'm not willing to do that. It's not safe, and, that's unconscionable. So, we could do that. We could just load them up and just to get them home, but that's not the right thing to do.
That's different than doubling back, you're saying? And that's not going to happen either with first student, will it? Unless it's in the
Well,
contract.
No. I mean, the drivers probably wouldn't do that either. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that we would be able to say every day, we're going to get all these kids transported just because we would need 10, 12 drivers every day who would double that. And there's just, I don't think there's that many on a daily basis. And then, you look at it, you go into a Friday, I don't think, we wouldn't have 16 drivers on a Friday with a double back. So canceling the route is almost a better solution than not being able to tell the community, we'll be able to get your student home today because we might not. And it would just be unpredictable. Day to day.
Can we, we've got a lot of slides. Is this about doubling back?
Just basically, no. What I'm
Same
saying
question.
is, do we have union drivers that are just sitting in a parking lot instead of doubling?
No. We are utilizing every driver that we have to the fullest amount that they'll do. We might have drivers that, like in between high school and elementary, that don't have a route, but that's just because there's not really a route for them. But the majority of those drivers that don't have a middle school route are covering for a driver that called back. So, we're filling in the gaps and compressing the amount of drivers we need to the greatest extent possible every day.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jason. Sorry.
Just some things that we've done and are actively doing already this year. Route consolidation. So from the beginning of the year, we've had 146 routes, and we've gone and consolidated a route. So we've taken 2 routes, combined them, moved students from the route that didn't have a driver to the route that does have a reliable driver to cover it. We've managed to eliminate 33 routes from the ideal routing scenario. That's reduced our driver need by 6 overall. You can see we're down to 113 routes today from the 146 that we started the year with. And you can see the range of dates from when we implemented those consolidations. And there's a few in September, there's a couple in October, there's a few in November. It's an ongoing process, and as we see the opportunities, we implement them. That does have a diminishing return. As you consolidate routes, then the combined route has more students on it. It runs longer. So, they reach a point where you can't consolidate anymore. I don't think we're there, but, it takes like real-time feedback. We need to get head counts. We need to see which students are riding, which students aren't riding. Occasionally, we find out this student hasn't been on the bus for a couple of weeks. We call the parents and they're like, oh yeah, we bought him a car. He's going to drive from now on. Okay, we can eliminate that stop, and now it makes sense to consolidate it. So that it does have kind of a diminishing return there.
And Matt, before you go on there, I just want to commend you for that work in the realm of route consolidation. I mean, that's when you look at those numbers that are up there and the real impact of that, it's impressive. And I know the work that went into that and the time that went into that for you and for your team to go from 146 routes down to 113 routes is not insignificant. To have an FTE reduction of 6 drivers in this environment You know, you got easy solutions, and then you got difficult and complex.
Yeah.
This falls under, you know, the bucket of difficult and complex. So just want to make sure that you and your team are publicly commended for that.
I appreciate that. And, you know, it is something that we look for every day. It's, you know, we look at routes that, you know, have more issues than others. You know, initially it was just, okay, there's this chunk of work where there's no assigned driver, and, you know, we were looking to get rid of those. And, you know, so the target shifts and the goalposts move, but, you know, it has yielded some results. We're planning afternoon double backs. We have a couple of them, and this is to kind of get around the driver being asked if they can do it or not, is just planning 2 buses worth of kids to go on 1 bus. Having the first set of kids are dropped off, and then building into the route, coming back to the school and picking up, you know, the next set of kids and dropping them off, and that kind of gives you a predictable time. It's a lot later than we would want. You know, the second set of students they're dropped off closer to 5 p.m., but, you know, it works and it's predictable, and you know your student is going to be home, albeit at 5:50 or at 4:50. But, you know, those are a little harder to find and identify, just at the rate of, you know, consolidating routes makes the initial routes longer, and, you know, putting together 2 really long routes as a planned double back doesn't make sense after a certain point. We do have 2 of those, I think one in Newtown and one in Goodnote, so that allows 2 buses to cover 4 routes worth of students, but those also only help in the morning, or in the afternoon. They don't help in the morning because, you know, there's a hard cutoff for when the kids have to be at school. We've also undertaken an extensive search for new transportation vendors. Most vendors out there aren't willing to take on new clients right now, just because they don't have drivers themselves. But we managed to find a couple. We've got Bucksmont Transportation and Germantown Cab. They use, you know, more of a 9-passenger van type of solution. Or I think the Bucksmont is actually using a Dodge Caravan minivan. But we were able to add those. ALC is up to 14 routes, or I'm sorry, Germantown Cab is up to 5 routes from 1, and that covers 8 students. And Bucksmont has 2 routes, covers 4 kids. But those are, you know, kids that have a ride now that didn't.
So first and foremost, my concern is safety.
Yes.
So when we're talking about, I'm thankful that we're looking at other transportation vendors. You say Dodge Caravan, that's fine, but are there any restrictions on age of the vehicle? Or are they required to follow the twice-a-year inspection because they're transporting kids? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so before we add the vendor, I'll go through a process with them where, you know, I'm looking at the vehicles you use, I'm looking at how you hire drivers, I'm looking at the background checks you do, and in each of these cases, all of the statutory limits are met. You know, anything that any background checks or license checks or, you know, EA child abuse clearances that a driver would have to obtain to drive a 77-passenger bus for a first student. These drivers also have to have those same clearances, the same background checks. Before the driver to drive for us, I review the driver's file, so to speak. So, you know, I have a copy of their clearances on file in my office. I have a copy of their motor vehicle record, their state and federal criminal background checks. So I'm very well in tune with the processes that these vendors follow and make sure that they are meeting or exceeding any type of statutory requirements. that they would need to transport students. So, they're not driving, a 1995 Honda Civic with the bumper duct tape on.
Yeah, that's important, and they do have to follow twice a year inspection.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. Another vendor that we have a good relationship with, that we started using last year is ALC. They had just a handful of routes last year, and they're another kind of alternative transportation vendor where they're not using a traditional yellow bus, but again, meeting all of the statutory requirements. They have significantly bumped up their capacity with us. They have 14 routes, 25 students. It might not sound like much, but those are routes that have 1 or 2 students on them by design, by requirement, by IEP, that would take up a bus that could hold 25 kids or 30 kids. So they're strategically deployed to free up capacity for our big buses.
Right.
So just some more mitigation efforts on our part that are kind of longer term. We've hired 2 additional of our own Council Rock van drivers. We have 4 of our own normal drivers that are employed every year to drive. Typically they're going to be non-pubs that have, or non-public schools that have 1 or 2 kids that are far, that are out of the way. And this year we've added to that fleet. Again, they handle routes that take up the capacity of a smaller bus, so that we can then redeploy that bus on 3 tiers of routes and transport a lot more students. So we had 1 driver start at the end of October. We had the second driver that just started a couple of weeks ago. Again, strategically deploying them to build capacity elsewhere. We are currently splitting the van usage for those drivers with the Chief program, the new Star Center. So, we don't have access to vehicles for those drivers all day, but there'll be a bid forthcoming for additional 9-passenger vans for them to drive that will help build capacity all day and really maximize those drivers.
Matt, sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Can you just talk for a minute about the timing and the process for length of time it would take from bid to actually procuring the van?
Yeah, the automotive industry, like everyone else, has many different supply chain issues going on. There's chip shortages, and anything that affects your standard auto manufacturer is going to affect your Class A buses, tractor trailers. So we're going to put this RFP out there, and we'll give consideration to how quickly the vans can be delivered. But I've heard estimates that are anywhere from 6 to 18 months for delivery of new vehicles, depending on how much you customize them. So we'll be putting the RFP out there. I'll be asking the vendors for, maybe we could tap into a used market and get vans that are in very good condition, but they're available right now. I'll try to keep the specs on them as generic as possible so that delivery can be sooner than later. But this is likely not going to really yield results until much later this year. And then the last but certainly not least is hiring additional bus monitors who are also in short supply. These are the bus aides that work with the students with IEPs, ride the bus with them, make sure it's a safe environment for the students to ride. And on some days, we're emptying out our office in the afternoon to have enough bus monitors to run, so that we can actually transport the kids that need the monitors, or else the route just, we couldn't transport them immediately. So that's also something that we need to consider, and we have that open right now for 3 bus monitors. We'll start interviewing them tomorrow, actually, and we'll be bringing them on board as soon as we can, just to kind of stabilize that supply of bus monitors as well. When we run really short, we have to pull a driver to be the bus monitor, so that we can transport the students who need that support, and that obviously impacts our capacity overall, which is what we're trying to avoid. This is kind of it's a busy slide, a lot of words, but long-term mitigation, we're looking at working with the union for the drivers to increase the number of volunteers and have a steady list of drivers who are willing to double back every day, who are willing to cover something other than the route they bid on, strictly on a volunteer basis. We've got incentives out there to incentivize drivers to switch routes and to become more flexible. That's kind of in the early stages of development. We should hopefully be able to roll that out relatively soon. It's a very slow development process because there's a lot of considerations on the union and the driver end of it, as to it's counter to a lot of the union rules that they have in place. So it's taken some time, but it will increase our flexibility. So that, if bus 5 has been missed a lot because the driver broke their leg and it's going to be out for a few weeks, then we have a driver that we can slide in to help, so that bus 5 isn't impacted every day for weeks. We talked to first student about increasing the wages and hiring incentives, strictly on a pass-through basis to Council Rock, so we're willing to fund it. That was met with some resistance just in the area. First student had just gone through after last year to help retention and boosted the wages in surrounding districts to be closer to what the starting rate is in Council Rock. So they don't want to really set a precedent where they're going to bump their rates here and then have to bump the rates everywhere else as well, for districts who haven't necessarily said that they are willing to fund it. So that's kind of unlikely, and it's a business decision. But we did manage to get the signing bonus from 2,000, which has been for quite some time, up to 4,000. They have job fairs going on. We have a list of drivers that we got from the Department of Education, who sent out a survey to every CDL holder in the state saying, hey, if you're interested in driving a bus, let us know. So we have been contacting, cold calling essentially these drivers who said they were interested in driving a bus. We're reaching out to them, to my office staff, and saying, hey, are you interested in driving for Council Rock? You live around here, you have a contractor, but it's great. Come on, the sun shines every day. And we're getting them in touch with the hiring managers and the location manager for a student to bring them on board. We've gotten, surprisingly enough, 2 applicants so far out of hundreds of emails that we sent. But, you know, again, it's one more thing, one more rock that we're turning over. We could fully enforce walk zones. It wouldn't close the coverage gap. It would save us about 6 drivers when all is said and done. That is something that, you know, it's not a great idea according to the community. We have, you know, there's a lot of safety concerns. Bucks County is not a place where there's sidewalks everywhere. There's no street lighting. You know, we just got daylight savings time, so you know, kids would be walking to school in the dark. They'd be coming home from school in the dark relatively soon. You know, there's weather to consider. So that would be a really tough sell, and it would be an extremely tough sell that's not going to solve the problem. Changing dismissal times to set up an additional tier, it would give us, you know, an extra hour in the afternoon where, you know, we wouldn't have non-public schools and our middle schools dismissing at the same time, so that would kind of reduce our driver need. It would save us, you know, quite a bit of driver capacity, but, you know, there's an exceptional amount of things to consider and an incredible amount of things that would have to change. You'd be looking at, you know, probably, you know, maybe reducing education minutes to get the kids out on time. They're maybe walking out the door with a bag lunch like last year, and to save a few drivers, it's not worth the impact to the education.
Can I comment on that one? As a parent of a high school student, tear that off, throw it out, and remove it, because I will fight that tooth and nail moving forward. Get rid of that idea.
Yeah.
Just so I'm clear.
Yeah, and I'm on board with you. I mean, last year was not ideal, and it's, you know, we had to do what we had to do, but
Right,
you know, it's not worth the
You're
impact.
not taking an hour off the kids' education.
Yeah, it's not worth the impact of the kids. And then there's, you know, capital investment mitigation strategies. A lot of parents have asked about, you know, is there a stipend for us driving our kids to school? You know, we have to, there's care considerations now that, you know, people are ride sharing, and, you know, they have their kids being picked up by a neighbor, and they're giving their neighbor gas money or food money for after school. You know, so this is kind of what that would break down to for Council Rock. Just by budgeted allocation per student is $1,121 per student that we plan to transport this year. So out of the total budget, essentially $10,480,000, and divide that by 9,167 students just to get that 1,100. This would be my recommendation if we're going to, you know, spend money to solve this problem. With offer you know, about $125 per student, with the exception of June. There's only 11 days in June, but $125 per student per month if you don't use the bus. You know, it's not a huge number. We don't have the kind of money to throw around like, you know, school district of Philadelphia would maybe. I mean, they were giving parents you know, hundreds of dollars to, you know, we don't have that same kind of budget to consider. But, you know, $125 per student, I think, would incentivize enough people to not use transportation that we would be down to the 90% of our current ridership that we'd be able to cover. We don't need half of the kids to not use the bus. We're close, but we're not there. So, if we had 10% of the kids who are currently riding, their parents take the stipend and, drive their kids in or, get a ride or carpool, then we would be able to cover the remaining kids. There obviously has to be strict criteria for the eligibility. If you have a parking pass for at Council Rock South, and your student has been driving themselves all year, and you told us over the summer, hey, my kid's going to drive, you wouldn't be eligible for the stipend because your student drives. We would base it, I would think, on the list of kids that we had planned to transport on, September 1st, like the third day of school, and go from there. We could take individual, case by case for people who feel like they should be eligible, but weren't in that initial basket of kids. But I think that gives us a solution that could be implemented quickly, and it limits it to 1 year. So if this is a 1-year issue and we're able to build our driver count back up, and the labor shortage that's a national issue right now kind of eases up, then we're not committed to this for next year. It would set a precedent, though, that if we do have issues next year covering everything, then we would be expected to give the stipend right away. Alternative?
I just had a quick question.
Yep.
So when we're looking at the budget allocation and then potentially giving this money to families in the district that qualify, it's essentially that money that is allocated. Are you taking part of it, since first student, that contract is based on how much they are transferring students, so you're essentially like moving the money?
Yes.
So it's not like it's an additional budget allocation, it's based out of that same amount?
Right,
Okay.
yeah, so, if first student is paid on an activity basis essentially, so if the route doesn't run, then we're not billed for it. So if we have kids take the stipend and, the route count goes down by 10 or 15, then those 10 or 15 routes, what we're not paying per student would then be paid to the parents instead. So it wouldn't necessarily cost more. It could if a large percentage of parents take the stipend and then their kids are not on the bus, but we still have X number of routes running where the savings from first student don't necessarily balance with what is paid out to parents, but I think that is a relatively narrow band where we'd be spending more than we allocate.
So Matt, point of clarity, please. So I think when we talked on the phone earlier this week, you said that it was $125 per student, and of course this is a recommendation or discussion item.
Right.
$125 per student or $200 per household. So if you have 3 students, your stipend would be $200 for the household, right?
Right. Yeah, we could do it one of 2 ways. So we could do $125 per student. And so if they have, 2 students in the house, they would get $250 a month. Or we could say, if you have multiple students, your stipend would be $200 or the $125 if you have one.
Right.
But to offer a slightly higher stipend per month for, households with multiple kids.
Sure.
That $200 would still keep us in line with what we budgeted.
I think that makes the most sense from my perspective, because then you're capping your cost.
Right.
So if you have a big household of kids, then you could do some damage to the budget. Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Excuse me, but how would you take a household that splits? Like they want some transportation for some of their students and others may not?
Good question.
I hadn't really thought that all the way through, so, I would think that they would receive probably the $200 per month. It would still require transportation capacity for some of the kids. Or, it would be, it would depend on if we plan to transport them or not. So if we had planned to transport all of their kids, then they would probably receive the $200 a month. But if we had only planned to transport one of their kids, but their other student has, a parking pass, and we're not planning to transport them, then we would stick with the 125. But I'd have to really dig into it to see, because, we definitely have that, especially in households that have, a high school or a middle school or an elementary kid. So it would depend on, what we plan for that family. Because, we did have the survey that went out in the summer, in July, I think, and, we have a fair amount of households that are like that, where they have one student that drives, and, the other students ride the bus. So it would depend. It's a bad answer, but.
Well, it's difficult operational discussion. I think it's a good discussion to have, and it's working in other districts. And if it doesn't cost us more in the budget, it's something you should explore, right? But there's going to be lots of areas that you're going to find that you're just going to have to work out. And I'm confident you can.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Matt, I would be remiss by not telling Jason live. He's one of the hardest working guys that we have in the district. He responds to emails. He's overworked, probably underpaid, and getting grayer the more I see him. Right?
He just
From a guy that has nothing to compare it to. So thank you for everything you've done. It doesn't get lost on me when I zip you an email, and most of the time, it's something somebody missed because of everything that's going on. So thank you. From it's affected my family, it affects probably every family in our district at some point. 2 points. Paying the families sounds good on paper. I'd like to know how many kids have to be bounced off of that route for it to make sense. So if I remove my one daughter and you're paying me $200, it's not going to make a difference for that route. So you're going to have to get probably a large percentage of that route to drive. The second thing is, and Robert, I mentioned this in passing, I think to some degree a fix or a consideration would be is opening our schools earlier and keeping them open late. I'd be willing to have the conversation with Korea to pay people overtime, because most parents, they got to get to work. If I could drop my kid off at 7 o'clock to their secure, great school where they could possibly do homework, possibly play a game or something, and know that they're safe, most parents are okay with that because they're relatively short, except for our folks in the upper ends of the part of the district. If you open up Collin Elementary School, I would venture to say 70% of the parents, knowing this is available, would drop their kids off at our school. Could we look at that angle? Because everything you're talking about, Matt, is a long process to fix. And it's not your fault. It's an epidemic around the country. But I want to ask, and that's why I'm asking, is there anything we as the buildings can do to receive these kids at an earlier time, keep them later, pay our staff to stay there? And I don't want to say a daycare, and I think it's well respected, it won't be a daycare. It's securing your kid a facility so you can go earn a living to keep your kids in our schools. That's the point. I don't see it on the slides. I would submit that. I think that would solve a lot of the ill wills that are out there. Because we all know this.
Sure.
You can show every slide, and I guarantee you most parents are going to say, yep, I understand. But what can we do? And I would love to have that conversation. I think this board would be willing to do anything to make busing right for our kids. But we know that the limitations are there, and we can't expect miracles to happen overnight. But in the meantime, that would be my suggestion. Let's see what we can do at the building level. Let's get our staff involved if they're willing to. If we're saving money by not paying for our student, let's pay our staff to help the kids out. And I would argue that I think we could do it some level of a group of our concerned staff members that would take advantage of making a couple bucks to watch our kids. And if I'm off base, I'm off base. But I think if we can start there, that may give us the leeway for you to do these long-term things. Because it's not happening. It's just not going to happen anytime soon. You know, we have routes that aren't even Council Rock, that we're taking kids X amount of miles out, that we have issues covering sometimes. So I wish you well. Whatever support you need from me personally and from the board, we're here for you. We need to hear it. We need to hear it. But I would respectfully think about what we can do at the building level to receive these kids earlier and keep them later. Thank you.
Can I throw one thing as a caveat off to that? Off base, I love it because this is my specialty. Twice a week, my wife runs a run club at Churchville, and that starts at 8 o'clock. The kids get dropped off. The parents volunteer to help. They open up the school. And that's taking, seriously, it's probably 50 to 60 some kids out of, I don't know, it's over 10% of the school, and it's a hit. And more people want to do it because, and I think the parents like that just because of what he's saying. And I think if we just do maybe the run club, maybe we can open up some other things and may be able to relieve things and have parents actually volunteering to help for whatever it is their passion is, whether it's running or maybe a morning, like my son just started STEAM club today. That's an after-school program. We go pick them up. That's one kid left. So maybe these before-school programs we can develop and use the resources of our community that want to engage the children, that follow the background checks and do all that stuff, can actually help. Because I know in Pennsbury they have to pay the staff longer for the double backs to watch the kids, and that should just be normal. But, you know, use the sources. We should definitely engage more of those ideas. Just thought on his. Thank you.
Yeah, no, engaging the community is definitely a worthwhile exercise, and I can definitely put something like that together.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, Robert, you would know. I mean, if there's even a one from our staff to consider something like that. But I know. I mean, I can speak for Holland. Joe McClay and his people keep the building open to 5:30 for the parents. And a lot of times they're getting the late phone call 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So, I mean, that's a relief. I know I can be there for get my kid. But not everybody can be. But knowing that's available, yeah, I understand the bus isn't working today, but she's going to be fine. She's going to be playing basketball. She's going to do her, hopefully she have her homework done. But it makes a parent not trigger an email that's nasty and we can't handle. So I'm just trying to think outside the box, whatever we can do to help you.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the support. I mean, it's, there's been a lot of support, just district-wide for anything that anybody can do. We have, people building volunteering as bus aides every day to help fill those gaps for us. And, there's been a tremendous response from the administration down to the support staff, the health staff. It's definitely appreciated. Another capital kind of investment, again, long term that we can do is, just have the district supplement the capacity, and that looks like purchasing 10, 15 buses and hiring 10 or 15 drivers. And it's a difficult market to hire drivers, but I think we could do it. There's enough drivers out there who, for whatever reason, they want to work directly for a district instead of a contractor. And we could find those people and hire them. Each bus, though, is about $95,000 to $110,000. Each driver is, $55,000 or $60,000 if they just worked the school year. and not ESY. So, it's 150 to 170,000 per bus and driver that we bring on. It's there's a reason that we're an outsourced district, and, this is a massive capital and, human capital investment that would, that again, I mean, it would take, 6 to 18 months to complete delivery of a new bus. And hiring a driver, again, would take months probably.
Who owns the buses that we currently have? Are they First Student?
First student owns.
First student
buses.
owns?
Yep.
Didn't we pay for them though? That doesn't sound right, but okay.
We paid for them as part of the contract, right?
But they own,
I mean, that
When we
predated
converted-
me, but
When we converted to propane, I believe we supplemented the cost of the buses. I don't think we paid for them outright, but we helped.
is there any opportunity in discussion with student, because I'm assuming they have buses sitting idle because they don't have drivers to drive them. If we did something like that, number 2, as a mitigation effort, would there be any, do you think, any desire for a student to help us close that gap by having Council Rock drivers drive First Student buses?
Yeah, I've actually explored that with First Student. We would have to add insurance for it. We're not currently insured to drive school buses. But we'd have to add insurance for it, and we could sublease the bus from First Student for $150 a day.
That sounds like a good solution in the short term. The question would be, is Council Rock willing to take on 10 to 15 drivers that they're paying a salary and then Peace's contributions? And it's a lot harder to get rid of your own employee, as we all know, than a contract, right?
Yeah, and then, the long term for that though is if we could convert them to van drivers, I guess, longer term, but in the, we come into next year and we have enough drivers to cover the work, and then we're stuck with these drivers who, presumably it would be a new class of employee. That's something we have to negotiate with CRESPA. And then, we have these CDL drivers not driving buses.
Well, I think, my feeling is, not to monopolize the conversation, but this is probably not a one-year problem, right?
I doubt it.
So, it could be a 5-year, let's hope no longer than that, but I actually like, you have gotten to 3, but I think all 3 of those make sense together.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely be, it would be operationally feasible to bring on additional drivers and have them drive full-size buses, just from a
But
process standpoint.
first, I keep saying first student,
Yeah.
First student buses,
Yeah,
right? Because that'll save the lead time, then you're at a couple months, 2 to 3 months to hire the drivers potentially. And then if the buses are idle, $150 a day doesn't seem bad to me, right?
Yeah.
Compared to the outlay of $95,000 to $110,000 for how many buses? You can spend 10 to
like
15.
10 or 15, yeah.
Right. So that's a $1.7 million right there, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would be $150 a day. I mean, so about $2,500 a month per bus. Just to give her a round number to it. And then, last but not least, we are in our final year of our contract with First Students, so we have the transportation services RFP that's out there. It's kind of designed to have Council Rock be a 2-vendor district. Like most districts our size are, usually a mix of, 2 different vendors or in-house and outsource. So, we've split the district up a couple different ways and put it out there in the RFP. and tried to make it as attractive as possible to transportation vendors of varying sizes. Off the top of my head, First Student is probably the only vendor that's big enough to just walk in and say, we'll cover everything and be able to do it. Just out of sheer size, capital outlay for 103 buses, and if we're running everything in an ideal fashion. So, ideally the RFP will bring in good competitive bids that would allow us to have, multiple vendors. It would increase, I think, our access to drivers. You'd have at least 2 companies worth of driver recruiting going on. A secondary vendor might be able to bring some drivers of their own that work in the area, and just kind of make our outsource more robust. And if one vendor is unable to cover something, we have a second large vendor to lean on to say, hey, you have standby drivers tomorrow. These, the other vendor can't cover these couple routes. Let's have you cover them instead. So we'll see how that plays out. I think bids are due next week, so we'll see what that looks like. Any way you cut it, I think we're going to look at a pretty significant increase in cost. Even if we remain just the First Student, it's going to cost a lot more for transportation in the upcoming years. But again, it's not a guarantee that we'll get 2 vendors. But RFP was designed that way. And then additional for our communication strategies and pitfalls, and why it's kind of difficult to say we're going to have transportation issues for the whole upcoming week. It's an essential part of what we do is communicating, but the coverage is unpredictable in that every driver that calls out is not created equal. So one driver that calls out might have 3 full routes for that afternoon. Another driver that calls out might only have 2. So that if a driver calls out that has 3 routes, then that's a lot more to cover than a driver that has a gap in their day, and would probably be asked to help cover something in between their elementary and high school. So our ability to cover the routes and what is covered and what is not covered are highly dependent on things that are not necessarily predictable. So, if a driver is going on vacation for a week, we might be able to cover some or all of their route on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, but not Monday and Wednesday. So it would be unfair to say on the Friday before, like, hey, your driver's on vacation. We're not going to have a bus for the whole next week if we can cover it. So it's very difficult to say with any degree of accuracy or a high degree of accuracy what is or isn't going to run on a given day. So we do communicate as far in advance as possible. If we know that a driver is going to be out all day, typically a driver will be out all day, and there's a really low likelihood of us not being able to cover it, we will communicate that ahead of time. but we don't necessarily want to say we can't cover it if we think we can. And then, those variables will shift throughout the day, and even if we think we can cover it in the morning, maybe that route just isn't something we can get by the time, 12 o'clock rolls around. So it's very difficult to say ahead of time what's going to happen.
And that's part of the frustration, right, for a mom or a dad?
Yeah.
Because
For a lot of
you're
reasons.
waiting, hey, there wasn't service in the morning, why don't you just tell us now that there isn't service in the afternoon, but sometimes we can
Right.
arrange for service in the afternoon. So just so parents know at home that, Matt and his team, they're doing everything they can to get as many routes covered as possible. And unfortunately, that's a timing mechanism, and then the communication piece that needs to follow. And I know that we've struggled with our dispatchers because they're out covering,
Yeah.
because of the shortage.
Right. And, like Robert said, we may not get information right away because the first two dispatchers are out driving and they can't respond to our emails or answer our calls until we're back off the road. That exacerbates communication delays. And, what we don't want to tell people is, hey, your bus is not coming, and then turn around and have a bus show up, because it's wasteful. It's, people make plans, they rearrange their whole lives, they put off, dance and soccer, and tell their boss they're leaving early, and then they get an email at noon saying, hey, the bus is coming. And now it's just they went through all this effort to rearrange their whole afternoon, their whole evening, and change the plans, and they didn't need to do that. And that is more frustrating, I think, to a lot of people than not having the bus come in the first place. So, we really try to avoid doing that whenever possible, but, it does happen. It's a constantly shifting puzzle, and, from the second that morning pickup ends, we are working on the afternoon, and we're pulling, we're pulling things together, we're pushing things that don't necessarily fit together, and just working out as much coverage as we possibly can. So it's a constantly shifting picture until we just run out of resources. So we do communicate as quickly as we can, and we communicate as accurately as we can. But it's very, very difficult to say what's going to happen more than 12 to 24 hours out. But we continue to work on it. We continue to try to be as on point as possible. And in the ideal world, we don't have anything to communicate, and that's really where we're trying to get. So that's all I had.
That's a lot.
It's
That's a lot.
not
I think it's timely and necessary. We've been hearing about this for a long time. This is the first real public discussion we've had, and I think it was a lot of information. I think it was great information. I want to, Ed Solomon is absolutely right. I was having a conversation with a parent today who had some frustrations about his daughter's transportation, had some ideas, and I said, email Matt. I gave him your email address. The team is very receptive to other ideas. We don't have all the good ideas, we're open to it for sure. So I appreciate that. Great work. Any questions before I make some comments and have some questions from the board? No? Okay. Are there routes, Matt, that are not being covered more than others? So to give you an example, I've heard from a couple parents that one mother says, you know, we haven't had a bus in 3 weeks. And you and I talked about that early on. It was a private school busing situation, but are there routes that are not covered more than others?
Yeah, I mean, overall, there's definitely routes that have been impacted more than others. Generally speaking, those are the routes that have not had an assigned driver since the beginning of the year.
Okay.
So, you know, it's always a sub-driver, it's always, you know, last-minute coverage, it's always the route that's doubled back. So those are the routes that are impacted the most. We are getting down to a smaller number of those. But yeah, there are routes out there that, I mean, there's bus 22 comes to mind. It's a bus that goes to St. Andrews. They've been impacted, I think, the most out of any route. But it's definitely not a situation where, you know, the bus hasn't come for 3 weeks. There's no route out there that I can think of that has not had a bus for that long. You know, we do get drivers to cover things when, you know, they're impacted over and over and over and over again. You know, we'll put layers in place to make sure that, you know, those 2 or 3 drivers we have to move around are set up to cover those routes. So, you know, yeah, there's definitely ones out there that have been impacted more, but, you know, nothing like 3 weeks running.
Okay. Only other comment I would have is, Ed talked about the public, Ed Solomon talked about the public being involved. You know, we've had great success with the Financial Advisory Committee. Maybe since this is going to be a longer term, hopefully not, but issue, maybe you reach out to the community and have some kind of transportation advisory committee. You might be able to bring ideas, maybe help, even if it's just helping to get the word out there that Council Rock is understanding it and working on it. And, you know, having those people out in the community, either bringing ideas or getting the word out, I think can be beneficial. So that's just a recommendation. All right, Matt, do you have anything else?
No, that's
All right,
it.
Excellent job, thank you.
Thank you,
Great,
man.
thank you very much, Matt.
Respectfully, I'd like to let Matt go home.
Yes? Absolutely.
Yeah, he's got to call out somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate the venue and the, you know, again, this.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, excellent.
Everyone has been.
Doing a great job. All right, Jason, you got 5 minutes.
No problem. No problem. So 2023, 2022, 2023 budget. First of all, the distinguished gentleman to my right, Bob Ruchak, good friend and colleague. We worked together in Marshall, has done yeoman's work, keeping the district afloat in the business office. So I want to say thanks to Bob. Thanks to the board for the support. That's a great selection. And tomorrow, Bob's last day with us. So
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me. It was a wonderful opportunity. I really appreciate that you selected me. It was nice to be a part of your district, your community, and to serve.
You did great
you.
work, Bob. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yes.
So we're putting all the pieces together for the budget. One of the biggest things that's in my job description is to help Robert put the budget together. And one of the biggest pieces is transportation. We have a few pieces that we want to talk about. Personnel, we have collective bargaining coming this year. We have contractor increases and PSERS increased rates. They have not been released yet, but PSERS is looking to be certified somewhere in mid-November, early December. Debt service. We'll talk about debt service later with the construction projects. And there's certainly an impact on the general fund when you build that budget to make sure that you have all the pieces in place and a working capital to make sure that you can pay for your projects as they go. And then transportation, I mean, Matt did a beautiful job. Thank you for most eloquently speaking. I couldn't have said it any better myself. And I thought that these solutions are best brought forward by those who are closest to the problem. So the cost of new transportation contract, that is out for RFP, and we're excited to open those and perhaps bring, maybe there'll be a surprise, you never know. And then vehicle needs. We do need vehicles. Matt did not talk about the cost of renting a van, but we're talking in the neighborhood of $3,500 per month per van if you went to enterprise. It's prohibitive. So the concern we have is, well, we have working capital, we have fund balance, why don't we allocate it? We have special education students, we have a variety of sources of dollars that we can pull to perhaps take care of those needs now. But they all have to be funded into the general fund budget for next year. And additionally, the big wild card, everyone says it all the time, but the impact of COVID-19. There have been some really interesting fallouts, efficiencies that we've been able to gain across the county as far as how we educate kids and how the programs that we brought to bear. But we don't know all of the economic factors outside of Council Rock. And so some of those unknowns will certainly impact revenue streams, and for positive or negative. So we want to make sure that we're keeping a track of that. There is a fifth that I'd like to add there, it's technology. Technology is always a bear. So that will come into the impact where we're trying to replace computers. They're sitting broken, don't get parts. The parts are sitting in a container on a port somewhere, waiting for them to come. Matt and I have spoken, Matt Frederickson and I have spoken at length about some of the challenges related to technology. We want to make sure that we're building enough capacity in the general fund budget so that we can fund making sure that we keep our kiddos online. Any questions there so far? Then questions that I have for the committee about budget assumptions. Does the committee want to consider an early adoption for Act 1? We don't recommend seeking Act 1 exceptions. I asked Bob, one of his closing duties is to find out if we would be eligible for one of the three exceptions under Act 1, which would be special education costs, PSERS rate increase, as well as grandfather debt. And since we don't have any debt that's older than 2006, we wouldn't qualify for that one. And Bob was kind enough to do that work for us. We do not qualify for exceptions under Act 1. So any additional funding north of Act 1, which will be on the next slide, would have to come in form of a referendum. And I think it's been successful all of 2 times in the Commonwealth. So I come from New Jersey. You vote on your tax budgets every year, and it's the one tax that people get to vote no on. So it's not very successful, so I would not advise it. We're doing the internal work to build the first look at the budget. All of the budget sheets have gone out to each administrator who's responsible for building those budgets. With the caveat, the revenues much match expenses. So the cost that we build into our budget, we've got to have the money to pay for it. And whether that be used in fund balance, but that does impact your future capacity in fund balance. Right now, Council Rock does have a healthy fund balance, but I will tell you, coming from a district that did not have as robust of a fund balance, those swings can go negative really quickly. So we want to make sure that we're building enough capacity within the reach of our expenses, and then the board's ability to enact the tax. Dr. Frazier has asked me to consider building the 5th elementary special into that scenario, and then I've been working with Dr. Sanko regarding possible cost savings within existing programs and efficiencies, and building as much efficiency as we can into the budget. And this is day 7 for me, so I'm trying to get to a consistent parking spot, and which way I come to work. So those efficiencies are the first and foremost. And then just a quick overview of the early work processes. we're building the scattergrams for salaries, building in the Peasers costs. So 70-some% of your budget is salaries and benefits. And then you have what has been affectionately known as the 300s to the 900s, your purchase services to your other services, which are not labor related. Your contracts, your tuitions, your supplies, your books, your fuel, all that stuff. We're trying to keep those as level as we can. But as Matt had alluded earlier, the cost of fuel, I don't know if you've fueled up lately, but the cost of gas 2 years ago is way different than it is now. So we have to build in those considerations as we build in next year's budget. Those will be reviewed. They're due just before January. I'm excited to get those sheets. I'm excited to learn more about how it's built in Munis. I've been working on training in that program. And I hope to have a better handle on how it looks for you for our next meeting. So, questions there? Sir?
Jason, thank you for this, and welcome again to Council Rock. We look forward to a great working relationship. Jumped off the table, possible cost savings within existing programs. Mrs. Marcel and I have in-depth conversations with Mr. Stone about ripping apart the budget, looking at cost savings, finding what works, what doesn't work. I'm thrilled to see that on your slide. The only question I would ask is, it's day 7, so I won't hold you to it. Is this a long-term thing? Are you looking to get down and dirty with this early on? Give me an idea because it's up there.
Sure.
What are you looking, because I like it. I think, and Robert, we talked about this too. Natural reset line. What's working, what's not working? What can we add in place of something that's not well attended?
Right.
Because the biggest bang for a buck is things that are well attended.
Sure.
So I'm interested to just, you don't have to give me an answer to that. I'm interested in this. I want to be public about it. This is great. That fifth special, when Mrs. Marshall and I talked about this for years. Congratulations, it's great stuff. But I'm glad that you're tackling a couple of those things that jumped off the page. So,
coming from a place that did have to search for efficiencies, it's close to my heart, but I want to make sure that when we look at the budget, we need to make sure that we are cognizant that there are souls behind those dollars.
right.
And when it impacts students' lives and families' lives, we want to make sure that we're as thorough as possible. And sometimes the efficiency is not worth, and I tell my team all the time, the squeeze is not worth the juice.
Sure.
Because sometimes that juice is really bitter.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're really careful.
And again, I'm looking forward to hearing updates on this as it works itself out, but that jumps off the page of me. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned increased fuel costs,
Mhm.
which everyone is seeing in the news. I've seen also a lot of stories about food costs, supply chain issues.
Yes.
Do you think that once, some of the kind of cost estimates for the next budget come in from the different kind of parts of Council Rock, do you think that we'll see an overall potential increase in certain areas?
I do. Specifically transportation and food procurement costs. It's not on the agenda because I didn't have enough time to wrap my arms around it, but food service is also first and forward in my mind. We have to make sure the kids get to and from school every day. We have to make sure they get a lunch. And then somewhere in that 8-hour period, they have to have some instruction, right? And that's kind of what we've been dealing with COVID. And it's not just in Council Rock, it's all over. So yes, to answer your question, I do anticipate some increases, but I also in speaking with Dr. Frazier and the rest of the cabinet, there are some ideas to bring forward to perhaps create some efficiencies to mitigate that. And that's all in the big picture concerning debt service and how aggressive the board wants to be with the projects. I know Doug's over there chomping at the bit trying to get to the next part of the agenda. So if that answers your question,
Just for a later time.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Sure thing.
exactly.
Sure thing.
Just wanted to.
Okay, continue. All right, so this is probably my least favorite slide, but it's my favorite slide because it puts the tax increase potential to a page. The current millage is 132.8073. The value of that millage to increase it 3.4%, which is your Act 1 index, buys you 4.5 mils. Possible millage. And then you can potentially yield, if your valuation stays the same, you can yield approximately $5.7 million tax increase revenue. That max increase based on a $30,800 homeowner, so brass tax down to the average folk, $175 a year, $14.59 a month, or $336 a week. I'd like to keep that foremost because there are some people who say, well, that's no big deal. I'll have one less latte. But there are other people who are on fixed incomes who, that's their medicine budget. So we want to make sure that we're cognizant of that and we're considering, we can raise taxes, but is it for the right reason? Are we bringing the programs? Is it what are we creating the efficiencies? And obviously, I take direction from Dr. Frazier and the committee to build the budget however we like, but I wanted to make sure that this slide was burned into the brain as we consider all of the issues that we're dealing with on the table, because they do all cost money, and there's a finite amount, and we need to decide where those priorities are.
So I'm reminded of a conversation that Jerry Grupp had when he was on the board here. And, Jerry said we're always talking about the averages, and this is good, right? But only a certain amount of people fall on the average. And we've got a lot of people on the higher side, and we do in Council Rock have people on the lower side. I don't know how it was done, but there was kind of a graph or different numbers. Do you remember this at all?
Vaguely.
Yeah. If you called ex-school board director Jerry Grubb, he would spend whatever time you need having a conversation about this, and probably will have the slides. So you may want to do that because you made a good point.
I'd be happy to.
He would, I think he would really be happy about that, yes. But anyway, that might be helpful because it really does show the span. That's my only comment on that.
Absolutely. And I believe
Jerry's texting me
Yeah, I'm sure he's listening right now.
Just a quick look forward to next month. I know it's a very short month in terms of school time and holidays. So my hope is to ask the committee to put forward the Impact 1 resolution. Be my recommendation for you to consider that either next month or in January. We have until the 27th to submit that. That would be a huge relief for me and my team for a bunch of reasons administratively. Then I hope to have a first look at the general fund budget with projection of salaries and benefits as we currently know them. So that would be a quick and dirty look at the contractual increases as we know them. Quarterly review with Cornerstone, I look back to December of 2020, and there was a visit from Cornerstone. We're looking to schedule that so we can show how the cash portfolio is going. And it is my sincere hope that we'll have a general fund audit presentation by the EBD. Mr. Hogan and I have shared space in another district, so I'm confident in his abilities to fine-tune our documents. Our AFR is ready to be submitted. All we need is an approval of the audit and then submission on the state website. And we're ready to go. We'll be in compliance and stop Dr. Frazier from getting banquet letters from PDE threatening state subsidy. Kidding. Every day it's not turned in, there's a letter that goes and you can lose state subsidy, but that situation is well in hand on our end. So, questions?
If I may?
Sure.
The Act 1 opt-out resolution you want us to vote on, probably want to put that in January because we're going to have a new board in December. It's too much to ask.
Sure.
Of the new board. I think if I'm trying to buy them a few weeks, admittedly over the holidays, I think everyone will go with your recommendation on that, but
Sure.
It just might make sense, unless you have burning need for December.
No, we do not.
Okay.
You certainly can think about, and forgive me, this is related to the December finance meeting.
Yeah, it's fine, but it's yeah, give them a chance to breathe is all I'm saying, so.
Understood.
Yeah.
Questions? Public comment.
Is there any public comment from anyone? No. Okay. Can I make a comment before we adjourn this meeting?
Sure.
Okay, so this is my last meeting as chair of this committee. This has been my favorite part of being a school board director, or one of them. I want to say a couple things. No school district in Pennsylvania has better processes that we've put together, and I will stand behind that. No other school district has a company like Cornerstone coming to talk about cash management and the other processes. No district has better systems and information than we have. Nobody. Very few use the planning tools, and probably very few use them well. While other schools may have more money in their general fund than we do, no school district has a better foundation for financial success than we do. So I implore the remaining board members and the incoming board members, please keep it going. Please don't mess this up, right? I welcome Jason one more time. Thank you again, Bob. You did an outstanding job. I love the way you think, and I love the way you work, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're
The feeling is mutual.
Thank you, thank you. So seeing no other questions or comments, we're adjourned.
Thanks, Mark.
Good?
Mark, thanks for all your.
Yes, of course. Sorry?
Yeah.
We're going right away?
We're going to go right
Okay.
away.
Doug is ready, look at him. This is
All right, we are going to convene the Facilities Committee meeting at this moment. Mr. Taylor, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, I can.
Thank you. And I also would like to thank Bob. It was great working with you. The little bit of time we had, it was productive and really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. You certainly gave me a lot of challenges. I had to bring myself up to the seat quickly.
Yeah,
You've got a lot going on.
it was great. Thank you. So let me start with this. We did have a presentation on the 21st of October where we went through the whole capital improvement plan in great detail. So I'm not going to revisit all of those discussions again. If you want to see those, go back to the October 21st back on YouTube, and you'll see the presentation of the capital plan in greater detail. The first slide, which was presented that evening, basically shows you the projects that are being considered in the near future. And the Richboro Elementary School is scheduled to hopefully start construction in 23 and wrap up in 24. So we would need to revisit this and put this out to bid around this time next year. So in 22, heading into 23. And then we would get everything going for that project and make the moves and everything else that we do. Richboro Middle School is on here only because at some point we will vacate that building and have to make a decision on what we want to do with it as a board, decide what the future of that facility will be. It is very tired, and we are doing everything we can to keep it chugging along to facilitate students as a swing school. Newtown Elementary School is then next on the list, and these dates are certainly subject to change, obviously. The target is around 28, and Welsh Elementary School, the target is around 30 to start construction of those. Obviously, those are discussions for another day, but those are just on the radar as projects that we need to keep looking at down the road. Right now, we're working on the Soul Limestone project, which is going well. We have steel in place. We have the metal deck roof going on. Insulation is on site, which is very difficult to get. So we're fortunate to have that. And we're looking like we're right on target to get this first phase finished for next summer, which is a key phase in order to keep everything moving there. That is the critical phase. We need those 13 classrooms of swing space to start moving the other kids out of the building and start to renovate the rest of the building. Hillcrest is also moving along, and we're on pace to finish that in the summer and move the kids out of Richboro Middle and back into Hillcrest. Richboro Elementary School is, as I said, one that we anticipate awarding sometime around March of 23. And then Richboro Middle School is really to be determined. I threw a budget in there of what it would cost to likely go in, do the remediation of any environmental issues that are in the building that remain, pipe chases, above ceilings, boiler room, any other floors that could still be hanging on, and then demolish the building and kind of restore the site. That's just a ballpark of what it would cost if you were to consider something like that. There's many other options, obviously. So the draft 5-year plan, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. This is, again, was reviewed in October. The primary reason to show this is, we do have a long list of projects proposed for this coming summer, and really for every summer, and you see the highlighted columns. So the bottom line is, when you look at those 5 years projected, we're around $35 million with fees and contingencies. And we once had a backlog of around 14.9 million. We're still looking at about 12 million in deferred projects that we're trying to catch up on with about a $35 million budget. We have a budget with a combination of numbers of around 7.2 for this summer. Still shooting to try to get a budget down the road of around 4 million to 4.5 million for capital projects. That is the goal we should set based on the square footage that we have, the added square footage, the added fields. The more we do, the more we have to think about what that number looks like as well. And we talked about considering borrowing, and Mark, I thank you for pushing the capital projects and recognizing the need for that. That's something that you've always championed, and I do value you for that. So 2021, summer 22, we know we have 2 million in the budget. We have the bond that was approved, 1.7 million, and a fund balance transfer of 3.5, which gets us to the 7.2. In 23, summer 23, we know we have 2 million planned in the budget, or at least that's what we were considering budgeting for. The bond monies, which gets us to around 7.5. 24, we have 2.5 million hopefully planned for the budget. At that point, 2.8 in bond, around 5.3. In the summer of 25, hopefully we're building up to 3 million, 4 million bond, 7 million total, and then 26, the 3 million in budget, 4 million bond, 7 million. Totaling $18 million bond, 12.5 in budget, for a total of 34 million, which brings us to right around $1 million of that 35 million. And if things go well and we save the monies and we don't have to do everything we hope for, of course there'll be surprises in the next 5 years. But this should get us real close. So this is a real sound plan, and I'm excited to implement this.
And Doug, let me jump in there just real quickly, just to crystallize this. So the board will remember from the current budget cycle that one of our goals is to build in that 3 million for CIP work, 500,000 for tech reserves, and last year we were only able to do about 2/3 of that for both of those. Knowing that our number one goal is to have a zero deficit budget, coupled with hopefully having that 5th elementary special, that's why you're seeing this staggered approach getting up to the 3 million. So 2 million we know is in there this year. Our plan next year is to have 2 million again, because we don't want an increase there to take away from our ability to have that zero deficit budget, then step it up to 2.5, and then in that subsequent budget and thereafter be up to that 3 million mark. Does that make sense?
So this is a list of the proposed summer projects for next year, and we have some pictures. When we were first looking at the budget, I was trying to come up with options A, B, and C, things we really needed to do, things we really needed to do as well, and another list of things we really needed to do. But the good news is we can go after all of these and start to look at these projects. They're again in the range of that 7.2 million. Those projects include the canopies at North. At one point we were looking, and this is an area that we tested. You can see back in 1970 when they built this building, in every column they embedded electrical conduit with a junction box above, and they had uplights in there. So if you look at an old 1970s picture, it's beautiful. They were all lit around the top. But the problem is the moisture got into the conduit, into the boxes, and when steel corrodes inside concrete, it expands and it forces the concrete to fail. So it expels the concrete. You can see some of the cracking that we were seeing. The good news is this is correctable. So we did some test column. We had someone come in and look at correcting it. The other reason that this happened is when I first came on board, the tops of these canopies were all exposed concrete. There was no roof surface on those, so any moisture that was getting in those was going in through the bottom of it into the columns. So we corrected the top. We do have some protection on the roofs, and now we have protection of these. So there was some discussion about should we consider new canopies or can we renovate the canopies we have? And I think after looking at these, we can probably work to restore the canopies that we have and not get involved in going and tearing these down and building new, because, you know, that it would be a significant cost to do so. But we wanted to kind of gauge that against, if we're doing this every 10 years, does it make more sense to build? We feel that we can have a longer term repair here this time. And then we also want to restore this facade, in no way coat it, in no way change it, just there's some of the ornamental stone is starting to come off. We want to restore it back to its original condition and clean it and protect it. We have multiple sets of steps out of north that are like this, and what's happened is where the spikes go in and hold it in place, the wood is rotted. In some cases, the spike is still up flush with the step, but the step is gone. A lot of parents, grandparents accessing these fields to see kids. I think it's time that we address these, put some railings in, and make these safe for community. Also at north, the set of steps going into the gym have their own set of problems. We've temporarily addressed those, but we need to go in and address these steps. The railings are no longer code compliant, so we'll address all of those things. We have a little challenge in that these scuppers on the roof drain, they fall down onto the concrete, run down the concrete gutter, then into a drain at the bottom. So we have to find a way to address that as part of our project. The cell phone signal challenge at Rolling Hills is greater than most buildings, so we want to go in and address just that building so that we can communicate better. At Chancellor Center, the yellow steps right outside here, beneath those yellow steps, if you didn't know that, they're over top of the mechanical room. So when you're downstairs, you run in the mechanical room, you're underneath those yellow steps outside. That is the water barrier. But there's a lot of concrete that's failed, exposed rebar. We need to get in. I'm hoping we can try to push this project back to when we come in here and replace the mechanical systems, because that room is full of mechanical ductwork and units. They're going to have to take all the ductwork down just to access that. If we can wait, if an engineer can verify that this can wait until 24, I'd like to push this back and kind of team it up with that project. So we're going to see if we can. And those are the yellow steps. So underneath that is what you just saw. It's mechanical equipment inside. Another project we're going to do is we're going to help out with security. A lot of these door numbering systems they're varying throughout the district. The emergency responders have asked us to address this and have a universal numbering system, identifying numbering system on all the schools. We want to put something on here that's more permanent. We'll get placards that are made that we can affix to the doors, put them in a consistent location, and label every facade consistently, so that we're keeping, our responders happy, and we need to, for sure. And this is another tier of the project. Everything we just discussed, plus at the two high schools, the circulation pumps, which is basically the heart of the HVAC system. We get the water chilled. We can condition the water through boilers and chillers, but these pumps are going to push it through the building. And these pumps are getting tired, so we need to get the pumps replaced. Those are the pumps at north and also at south. We have a challenge. And those are a little more challenging. They kind of bury them in the back. We have to find a way to even get to them. The cooling tower at north behind the enclosure is getting tired as well. And then the final project we're looking at are, addressing the stone and the honeycomb panels at north, some paving at north, and we're also talking with Jason to try to address the circulation challenges around the building. He's been doing a lot of monitoring, counting. We're going to get back together with him and see if there's any way to improve the circulation around that building. Try to keep cars off of Swamp Road. Try to address the issue where we have the concrete barriers in the front of the building, buses are on one side, the kids' parking is on the other, so kids are going through the bus area. I don't think it's ideal. We can fix it if we'd like to, and then we'll seal the concrete and do the other things that we would do, restriping, and it's a good opportunity to do so. So we're working closely with Jason on that project, and Bill Rick Security, the whole team, to make sure we're looking at it from all angles. At north also, we have some steel lintels that have some corrosion. Some of these lintels were installed, set pretty far back in the wall, so we need to address those. And some concrete step work throughout the district. The schedule for these projects, obviously, we were fortunate enough to have these approved, the budgets approved earlier this month. For the sake of having the project budget approved, put something on the agenda just so that we have the formal capital project, amount approved. But we won't approve any kind of projects or any final costs until we receive bids, and then I come back for formal approval of those, and we'll have time to adjust at that time. The biggest key here, though, is timing, because getting materials is very difficult. So we're going to receive bids and have a recommendation to the board by the 10th of February, which is not that far away in terms of what we need to do to get there. And then we will review those at the facilities meeting on the 17th. What I'd like to ask is if we can also have the ability to approve them that same night, so that you'll have them the week before, we'll be able to discuss them here and hopefully approve based on the recommendation. Because if we wait until the March meeting, we're losing valuable time to procure materials. And I fear that there's going to be some projects that we still might not be able to satisfy the delivery date on. And we're going to bid those with language to identify if they can be done this summer or if they have to be deferred to an installation at a later date as part of the bid. So we're going to work to protect ourselves on that. But if we do it, the approval on the 17th, it's only an 18-week procurement period. And for something that's not a lot of time. And then miscellaneous items. So we've been meeting as an ad hoc committee for the turf, the synthetic turf field use for north and south. As you know, we've had a long time partnership with Crusoe. We do have other groups, Patriots, have come in and are interested in some field time. So we've been working on that. One of the biggest, most important pieces of this is making sure that the athletic directors at North and South both get the field time that they need first and foremost before anyone else comes along and uses the fields. And I think everybody agrees. We've had several meetings with Vanessa and Scott, the athletic directors from schools. And last week, they put together their kind of they got together on one of the days students weren't here and put together a spreadsheet of all the time that they need. So now we're taking that, digesting that, we're putting another sheet to determine how much time is available now for the outside groups up and above the times that we need it. And then we'll come back and we can have some discussions with that committee again about how we see the split between that working. As I said, it's a long-time partnership with Crusoe. I don't know that we can give them all the hours that they're asking for, but I think we want to try to increase their hours and lock into a new rate that's fair to us and them, and then introduce Patriots and give them some time here as well. So we have two fields and we should be able to work with both groups. And there's probably still time for some other groups, if they're interested, to reach out to us and let us know they are, and we can work with them as well. So that's the plan. Tonight, the biggest piece was just establishing the appropriate rates for profit and not-for-profit. And we've had a spreadsheet that we shared with the board many times. Tonight it's updated. The request last meeting was let's put that on the agenda tonight and then try to get those approved at the next board meeting. There's been a lot of benchmarking done. The last time our fees were adjusted was 8 years ago. But in the last several months, Pauline and I both, Pauline is our facility use manager. If you don't know Pauline, she's very busy with outside groups, and I'm really grateful for the work she does. We both reached out to many districts and we've updated our benchmarking based upon current numbers, and we're pretty much still on track with where we were. You guys have seen that information, but we talked to Centennial, Central Bucks, Pennsbury, New Hope, Silbury, Henry, Green Athens, Upper Moreland, Westchester, Great Valley, and the Factory, and a couple more. We just put the more local districts on here, and it did reveal that we should increase our fees, and for good reasons. So, and including folks like ABM custodian who come in and clean up afterwards, they have some old rates. Our own team rates were just not appropriate at this point. And I don't have to go through all of these numbers. These are all numbers that everyone has seen. The only numbers that have changed are the ones in red from the last time you've seen it, based on some additional discussions with Pauline. We would take the $20 for nonprofit to $35 at the gyms, for auxiliary gyms for nonprofit groups. And that's per 4 hours. The other change, and the biggest change for tonight, is the north and south synthetic turf fields. For a nonprofit group, they were paying $160 an hour. We're looking to bump that to $175 an hour. We would still maintain the $250 for the for-profit groups. But what this allows us to do is now go back and negotiate with CRUSA and Patriots on what their discounted rate would be for a long-term agreement. So we're really looking to bump this and then probably bump them up to, out to cost more similar to the old rates than where they are today. And just a couple other middle school classrooms at 15, and we're looking to bump them to 15 to 50. Primarily because those middle school classrooms have really improved from what they used to be. So those are not so dissimilar to high school classrooms at this point. And then the elementary classrooms are 5 and 10, 10 and 15. So not much of an increase there. And we talked about summer camps, $15 a camper is the current fee. We're talking about increasing it to $25 a camper. And maintenance team costs of $60 and $80 per hour is $70 and $95. Our security rates are $50 to $55 and $75. And the other numbers, you can see audio-visual support, which we need when we have outside groups using an auditorium. We don't allow the outside groups to use the mixing boxes or any of the other equipment. That's something that we manage for them. Auditorium manager and stage crew. We're grossly underpaid and hard to get volunteers at those rates as well. And then just as an application for temporary use of school facilities, we want to make some changes to that application. Nothing crazy. And we'll ultimately have East Reading Break take a look at that document and finalize it. So I want to bring back to you at the board meeting basically just the rate changes. And then East Reading Break will let us to kind of attach that to the policy for field use as opposed to an AR. It feels better that it's part of the actual policy. So the first item for board approval, as I said, board approval to add the updated fee schedule as an attachment to board policy 707. And we'll have to still update the AR to some degree. Security cameras for the Hillcrest and Salt Limestone projects. Those are included in the project budget. We worked through the cameras. We met with the security team. We met with the entire team, construction team, and all of the cameras have been determined for final location. What we're doing now, which is much better, is the multi-sensor cameras where we have 3 cameras in one dome that are fixed. So we capture the entire corner 24/7. The PTZ, the pan tilt zoom cameras, are only really good if somebody's physically operating that camera from a room all day long. So these cameras will capture the entire perimeter of the building 24/7. Inside we have some fisheye cameras. We have other cameras that will capture every space in both of those buildings. We are in need of a couple more zero-turn mowers. We have 7 total. 2 are newer, the other 5 are 12 and 15 years old. The timing on those, the time has turned over at least once. They're tired. We have about 400 acres that we maintain, so they get a lot of use. And this is one other item, it wasn't on your agenda, but we have vehicles that are no longer registered, they're tired, they're done, they're ready for the junkyard. In the past, we would either go out to Northampton or Newtown Fire Departments, and we would donate to them, and they would use them for practice emergency access or light them on fire and put them out, kind of thing. But Tom Crow, my assistant, reached out to some of the garages that we work with, that we have contracts with, and said, hey, are you interested in these? And if you are, what kind of credit would you give us for them? And we could trade it for, basically give us store credit for the vehicle. So we could convey and transfer these vehicles to any one of these 3 garages, and this is the cost they would give us for them. So Carver's Garage is willing to give us $825. I talked to Eastburn and Gray when I was talking about other things. They were perfectly fine with this approach if we're interested. So if we want to try to get a little value out of some tired equipment that's ready for the junkyard, we can get a credit from Carver's Garage, and we'll be able to repair some equipment and whatnot at this cost. And next meeting, December 2nd, we'll acknowledge the budget for the projects, the capital projects, and the 16th, I'll come back with just a more traditional update on projects. And that is it.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. That's very creative disposal of old vehicles. I like that. Thank you for all the benchmarking on the fees, and I know you put a lot of work into determining the time required for our programs for the turf fields. I know Dr. Thorward and Mr. Solomon have been very vociferous about ensuring that our programs come first. Would you remind us, CRUSA has paid over the past 10 years in turf use fees a real sizable
It's
figure.
about $500,000.
Yeah.
And the turf proper is about $500,000 to $600,000 to replace.
Yeah.
And
they're a great partner, so.
they've been a great partner, and we enjoy that relationship.
Yeah.
And they're very flexible. We have to bump them because we have a school event. They graciously step away. We have our event, and we give them the time some of the time. So they've been good to work with, and I expect that they'll continue to be.
Yeah.
And I hope that we can establish a similar relationship with Patriot FC, and that would be nice.
I'm sure we will. Questions, comments?
Can I make a brief comment?
Please.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I hadn't taken the opportunity to say I was so pleased to attend the ribbon cutting at Star Center. And what a beautiful facility, such a gorgeous home for our kids and the programs there. So I want to thank you, Mr. Taylor, and everybody who made that project possible. It was great to see the kids who are just so enthusiastic and happy to be there. It was a great day and a wonderful project, so thank you.
Thank you. That truly is one of the most special projects that I've ever worked on. To see the kids' reaction and to see that they have their workshops, and Chuck and his team were fantastic to work with. So
I can't imagine, I don't know of many other school districts that have such a dedicated facility for special programs like that. We've always been able to be proud of our special education programs, but to provide a custom designed home for them is pretty amazing, right? So congratulations to everybody.
yeah, nicely done. Thank you all.
Thank you for pointing that out.
This was a question I'd asked, someone had asked me, and I thought I knew the answer, but I figured I would try to get it in. The Star Center, does anybody who resides in that building or have classes or whatever, do they come from anywhere outside the district? Or is it fully encompassed with people inside the district?
Those are 99% certain answer in that they are all Council Rock folks.
99%?
99% sure. I can get back to you tomorrow if you want to
I think,
add that
I
final
asked Chuck that at
1%.
the grand opening, I think there's one kid that may be outside of Council Rock. don't hold me that.
Okay.
Okay.
But Chuck, I don't think Chuck was actually
It
sure.
was a question that was asked of me, and I thought I knew the answer, but since it was brought up.
And there's a story if there is, there's a story to why.
Yeah, I agree with Robert, we can confirm that information, but from my understanding, it is, all of our programs, so we can confirm.
Yeah, sounds like there might be an exception, but we'll follow up with
There's
you.
a story there, yeah,
Thanks.
if that is true.
Good. All right, Ms. Harris?
Sorry, there was one more agenda item on the finance committee. If you came through last time for education, it is a resolution for the acceptance of transference of responsibility for the trainer's contract. It is on board docs. The board did approve in the spring a renewal of the contract with Bucks Physical Therapy. Bucks Physical Therapy has sold all of its assets to JAG 1, and JAG 1 is not making any changes to the people. It's not a first order change which counteracts in terms of service, but it is a legal requirement. There's no requirement in the current agreement to reassign. So upon the advice of council, we want to make sure that that's considered by the board, so that we're compliant and stay out of the papers if something bad happens.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments? I think we're adjourned, thank you.
Great, thank you.